Welcome back, our podcast listeners. It is now 2024, and we have taken a little bit of a break from some podcasts for the annual meeting and then the holidays and time to be with family. And we're back hitting the ground running in 2024. And I'm so excited to introduce our next guest to you. So we are very lucky to have our own pharmaceutical crime correspondent. He agreed to come on the podcast as long as I would refer to him as our pharmaceutical crime correspondent. So holding up my end of the bargain, I would like to introduce to you Shabbir Safdar from the Partnership for Safe Medicine. And I'm going to give him a couple minutes to talk about a little bit about the Partnership for Safe Medicine. And then we're going to get into some really cool stories about pharmaceutical crime. So Shabbir, take it away.
Thank you. And thank you for my promotion to pharmaceutical crime correspondent. I've never had that title, and I'm as excited as you could possibly imagine to actually get to be one for once. The Partnership for Safe Medicines, which I run and have run since 2017, is a coalition of groups that focus on safety in our drug supply. So there's a lot of pharmacist organizations like the West Virginia Pharmacists in it, but also the American Pharmacists Association, National Community Pharmacists, the Wholesalers Association, and a bunch of patient groups. And the one thing that ties everybody together is our mission and interest in preventing pharmaceutical crime and specifically counterfeits in the supply chain. And the counterfeit problem in America of counterfeit medicine is pretty low, but it still happens. And there's a lot of things that go into preventing it from being a crime and preventing patients from being endangered or pharmacists from being endangered. But it still happens sometimes. And so I love digging into these crimes. I love then educating pharmacists and patients about how they're done so they can avoid that kind of criminal behavior. Because ultimately, there's nothing worse than getting a life-saving medicine that you have access to and can afford, and then finding out it's not real. That's pretty much the worst possible outcome for everybody involved.
So it sounds to me like what we're talking about is Law and Order PVU, Patient Victims Unit.
That'd be great. So a special victims unit, but for pharmaceutical crime.
So you have brought us a new case to talk about. So what is the crime that you've got for us today?
So recently unsealed, the DOJ indicted a number of pharmacists and what I'll call fixers in and around Bronx, New York. And what they were convicted of doing was buying medicines back from patients that in some cases they had dispensed the medicines to, but in some cases from just other patients, and then reselling them into the supply chain to other unsuspecting pharmacies that then proceeded to dispense them to patients. And this crime is not a new crime. I can tell you that for the 20 plus years that PSM has been in existence, we've seen this crime. It is getting harder to do because of the Drug Supply Chain Security Act and the serial numbers that you see on bottles. But it's an old crime. And in versions of this crime that were investigated last year and the year before, we saw people taking empty bottles and putting in pebbles instead of the HIV medicine that should have been in them. But they were trying to match the weight, and then they would sell it to unsuspecting pharmacies who would dispense them to patients. And if it was pebbles, obviously, that crime didn't get very far. But sometimes you even saw people dispensing, Excedrin. And I think there were patients out there who took Excedrin thinking that it was HIV medicine, and it was not, in fact, controlling their disease, which is hugely life-threatening. So in this case, they indicted these 9 individuals, and several of them were pharmacists, and they have text messages between the fixers who would go find Medicaid patients, and they would say, I know you got this HIV medicine. I'm looking to buy it. I'd prefer it if you didn't open it, and I'll give you $200. Right now, some HIV medicines cost $2,000 and $3,000 wholesale to buy for a patient's 30-day supply. If you buy it back from $200 and then you sell it to another pharmacy for, let's say, $3,000 minus a 5% savings, that's a lot of savings for the pharmacy, but it's also a lot of profit, which explains why these guys do this. They do this crime because it makes a ton of money So much money that you sometimes often see money laundering activity that goes with these crimes. And there's unsuspecting pharmacists out there, who would look really askance if they were getting a $3,000 bottle of medicine for $1,500. But if you knock just 5% off of it, and it's from a licensed wholesaler or pharmacy, as these are, then you don't actually arise that much suspicion. So that's basically the essence of what they were doing. They were buying medicine back from Medicaid patients and other patients on public assistance and selling it to unsuspecting pharmacies. And it's not clear that they were actually even selling real medicine. In some cases, they buy back just the packaging and fill it with random stuff they have.
As a pharmacist, what is the issue as a pharmacist who might unknowingly be dispensing that medication?
Well, obviously, if you're dispensing a bottle of medicine that has been already dispensed to somebody else and that has been sold to you as new, that's not safe for your patient, right? Independent of what's been in it, you don't know the temperature conditions that medicine's been through, right? We've seen in the recent case, the Gilead anti-counterfeiting team was working on, we had people removing labels, prescribing labels from bottles using paint thinner. And so patients at the other end reported taking medicine that smelled like paint thinner. That cannot be safe, right, in any shape of the word. Even if you're buying back the medicine sealed and redispensing it, you still got temperature control conditions. So patient safety obviously is the first thing that pharmacists worry about, and obviously the first thing that we all think about. But there's also a pharmacist liability problem here. If you sell something that is trademark good, and I will tell you that almost all branded medicine is trademarked, and it turns out to be counterfeit, there's a financial and legal liability that goes with it. And we've seen in some of the HIV medicine cases in the last 3 years, pharmacies that seemed to know that they were buying something too cheap to be true, getting hit with trademark infringement cases, civil cases. And those are very expensive. I don't work in this side of the world, but the people who still sell counterfeit handbags, if they ever actually get caught, are on the hook financially for so much money, you might as well just declare bankruptcy, right? Because it's the cost of what you sold it for and the revenue lost to the manufacturer who owns the trademark, and then you're paying for your lawyer, and you have to pay legal fees for the people suing you, right? That is so much money that you might as well just give up and start over, because there's absolutely no way to pay that amount of money for that. So there's liabilities both for the patient and the pharmacist. If you as a pharmacist are actually leaning into that crime, which almost never happens, I will tell you that pharmacists are the safest part of the supply chain. But if you ever actually were to get a pharmacist that leaned into that crime, you'd also, of course, be risking your license, which is not surprising. And I don't think in that situation, your pharmacist professional insurance would cover you. Right? You'd be fully exposed.
So in the case of many of these pharmacists that you're talking about, they were buying from what they thought was a legitimate source, unknowingly getting bad product. Enter in the DSCSA, correct?
Yes. So just to be clear, the pharmacist that got indicted in this recent case, which we call U.S. versus Aminov, because that's just the first alphabetical name of the people that got indicted. The pharmacist that got indicted clearly knew that they were buying back dispensed product, and then they were selling it to the pharmacies. The pharmacies that bought it unknowingly did not get indicted. It's just the people who were really culpable and involved in the crime. For a pharmacist on the other end, like yourself, if you get an offer to purchase medicine, you actually can check out its provenance using the DSCSA. You can take that serial number and you can actually go back to the manufacturer and start a trace. You can do it with an email. You can actually do it with NABP's new free tool that they're giving away to pharmacies over the course of this year called Pulse. And you would just type in the serial number into that, and you could actually electronically spawn trace requests to the manufacturer, to the prime wholesaler who took it from the manufacturer, and anybody in between. That would reveal the crime. But I'll tell you that a lot of the ways in which this happened, and at least for $3 million worth of these products, both HIV and also other high-price patented medications, were that they were sold on special pharmacy to pharmacy marketplaces, right? I think you've seen these where community pharmacies can sell medicine to each other when you need to deal with out of stock stuff or shortages. And you do it under an exception to the Drug Supply Chain Security Act called named patient need. And if you declare that I have a named patient who needs this medicine and I don't have access to it and I buy it from another pharmacy, licensed pharmacy, they don't have to give you their tracing information as to where they bought it from. And these criminals in this case sold $3 million worth of medicine through online pharmacy to pharmacy marketplaces. So you should be super careful when buying on those platforms and expect that you're probably going to have to do some medicine traces if you do that, which kind of makes me wonder if it's that much of a bargain at all, if it comes with like 8 hours of work.
So just to reiterate, the way that they would check it would be that you'd mentioned the new tool from NABP. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, there's actually pharmacists who've just done it with email. And I covered a little bit of this in a recent CE I did last year with the West Virginia pharmacists, but you can fire off an email to the brand security and quality team at, let's say, a company like Gilead that makes an HIV medicine and say, I've got this serial number. I bought it from this entity. I'd like to start a trace. And, the manufacturer like Gilead will tell you, oh, we sold that particular serial number to this prime wholesaler. And you can send off an email to the prime and then say, I heard you got this from the manufacturer. Can you tell us where it went to next? And you can actually do that with like 3 or 4 emails. In fact, there's a great case written up in the Wall Street Journal where a small town pharmacist got some HIV medicine that was too good to be true. He emailed one person, he emailed his prime and said, how is it that these guys get this medicine cheaper from you than I do? And they said, well, that's because that's a fraud. We've never had that serial number in our warehouse. Your whole transaction log you're holding is a fake. So you can actually do it without too much trouble, but it does take some time. And as we know, pharmacists are the busiest people on the planet in healthcare right now.
That's unbelievable. So are there any other legal obligations that pharmacists or pharmacies should have in terms of checking into a medicine?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I cover this in that CE that I did for the West Virginia pharmacists, but there are a number of obligations as a pharmacist dispenser that you have when handling medication that has any reason for you to be suspicious. And there's a whole handout from the FDA that explains the conditions under which you should be suspicious. And, things that are a little cheaper than they should be are all suspicious. And so you have an obligation, if you receive it, to do that investigation. If anybody is checking over, how did you act if there was a counterfeit outbreak and it turns out you had counterfeit product, they're going to ask you, did you actually investigate it when it looks suspicious? And you're going to have to explain your reasoning. So if it looks suspicious, you actually have to quarantine it and you have to run a trace. And there's rules about how, if you have 100 bottles, how many of them you have to actually check. But you do have a legal obligation to check that medicine and to quarantine it while you resolve whether or not it's legitimate or illegitimate, right? It's suspicious, and then it's one of two things. It's either real or not real. And at the point at which it's illegitimate, you're never going to dispense it. But you do have that legal obligation to quarantine it and investigate it if there's a warning sign.
So thank you for plugging our federal compliance summit. Shabbir was one of 2 speakers. We also spoke about USP 795 and 797 compliance. Both of those, along with the DSCSA, both came into effect in 2023. And so we wanted to make sure that we got that information out to our members and others. And it actually went to a bunch of other states that took part in it. So exciting to have something from West Virginia that is being used in a number of other states, and great content thanks to Shabbir with the DSCSA. I will say, if you've not taken advantage of it, it's still up on our website. You can still order it for, I believe it is 3 hours of live CE, and it's super good content. It's the only DSCSA conversation that is that I've seen has been interesting. So he has a knack for giving you the why it's important and then how to be in compliance. So he did mention the checklist from the, was it from the FDA? Is that correct?
Yeah, from the FDA.
We'll be sure to put that in the liner notes for the podcast so that you can grab that easily. And this is going to be an ongoing segment for us. I know that there are a number of other cases that we could talk about, and I'm really looking forward to sitting down with Shabbir over the rest of this year and talking about some of these kind of interesting cases that bring a little bit of importance to the work that we do to make sure that the medications that we're dispensing are safe and not counterfeit. So thank you to the Partnership for Safe Medicine for their sponsorship of the West Virginia Pharmacists Association. Also for the content that they provide and the work that they do. It's super important. Shabbir, would you like to plug your website that they can go to and get some more information?
Sure, I'd recommend you check us out at safemedicines.org. We also do regular videos about pharmaceutical crime that appear on YouTube and TikTok, where my 15-year-old daughter sees them, and then as well as on Facebook and formerly Twitter, and pretty much all the social media channels. And I'll send you a copy of this indictment that was unsealed for this case, for the Aminov case. You can actually read the text messages between patients and fixers and pharmacists talking about buying and selling already dispensed medication. It's really sort of shameful, but it's also good to understand how the criminals operate.
Definitely. And I think, one of the issues that we run into is that we're in a field where a lot of the medications are high value. And so whenever you've got something that's high value, you have people that try to counterfeit it and make money off of that high value. So one of the potential solutions is for us to find cheaper ways to make the medications, make them more affordable to where they're not so high value that people can use the system for ill-gotten gains. So again, I can't say enough. I met Shabbir, I guess it probably would be 2 years ago, in San Antonio. And ever since, every time I get the opportunity, I love sitting down talking with him. He just got so many interesting stories, and he definitely will make you laugh at some point. So thank
let me just put one more plug in. I just got a call about a week or two ago from a pharmacist in Milwaukee who was telling me about a problem they're having there where patients on public assistance are coming in and asking for clean boxes and packaging. And, we're investigating that now as to put together some educational materials for pharmacists about why that's basically a precursor to people committing the act of selling their medication back into the black market. So if you've had that experience, I would love it if you could reach out to me. You can reach us at safemedicines.org. You can email directly at editors@safemedicines.org. But we're looking for stories like that about, patients who are selling their medication and asking the pharmacist for clean boxes and packaging. If you've had that experience, I would love to talk to you.
And I'm guessing that you would probably tell them to trust your gut. And if something doesn't seem right, it probably isn't right. Follow through.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, the pharmacists are the safest part of the supply chain. And so generally when pharmacists come to me and tell me that they're uncomfortable with something, it's because it's probably illegal.
We do have a very good spidey sense, I imagine. It's always good talking with you, and I look forward to continuing this throughout the year. Hope our listeners enjoyed it, and we'll be back before too long with another pharmaceutical crime case for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Policy of pharmacists is a product of the West Virginia Pharmacists Association.